Going around the wicket will be Priyaranjan Jha, moving from GBS to an enterprise partner. Priyaranjan Jha, or Ranjan for short, Chief Operating Officer, PepsiCo Global Business Services, has 26 years of global experience in GBS and BPM operations, global capability centers, transformation analytics, technology, HR and marketing at PepsiCo, GE Genpact, Reliance Infocom, IBM and Tata Motors. At PepsiCo since 2019, he is currently the COO of GBS, responsible for all delivery hubs in the network. In his first role at PepsiCo, he set up the Greenfield India Center in Hyderabad and scaled it to over 2,000 associates. Some of his achievements include building a robust talent supply chain, establishing a retail analytics capability, and building industry alliances. So, welcome you, Priyaranjan Jha, and it's over to you.
Thank you. Are we all back or? Clearly not. So after the amazing previous session, which all of us got to enjoy, there is not much more to talk about value. Unfortunately, my session is about how do we move from GBS to a value engine for the enterprise. So what I'll try to do is to build on what was spoken in the previous session and talk more about what do we need to do as leaders, what behaviors will make it happen, what are the bottlenecks along the way. But first, why is today the right time? So if you think about a brief history of our industry, roughly 3 decades back, started with transactional processes, mostly to do with labor arbitrage. And I think Shalini said it, it was primarily because telecom revolution back in the day, in the 90s, made some of this work possible to do from India. And then finally, most of us who've been around in this industry for 10, 20, 30 years, we landed here by accident. We were never educated for a GPS, GCC, GIC model. It's just, we are accountants, we are engineers, we are MBAs, some of us are not even well educated, but we just happened to be at the right place, right time, where somebody said, come join this amazing bandwagon, which we don't have a name for. Initially we said centers, then shared service centers, then GICs, and then GCCs, or IT centers, outsourcing, onshore, offshore. We don't even know what this is, but please join us. So I used to work for Genpact back in the day. I remember in 2005, Pramod Bhasin said, or he used to say, in early days, trespassers will be recruited. Now this is our history of this industry. Even today, I know it's not modest, but it's the reality. Even today, we don't know who we are. You go to a conference by one body, they will say GBS, another body will say GCC, the third body will say, don't say either of these names, we are something else. So that's the confusion we have now, and this is the pivotal moment where we will have to reinvent ourselves. If we don't do it, the circumstances will. But then why is it happening? In my mind, the only reason it's happening is the talent arbitrage. So we are moving from labor arbitrage to talent arbitrage. Now what do I mean when I say that? If you go to most developed countries, the inability to hire of great, large, traditional industrial enterprises is just growing leaps and bounds. The young talent who's coming out of university in the developed world does not want to work for the legacy industrial organizations, period. They do not want to do supply chain procurement, financial planning kind of work, period. They want to go to the Bay Area with startups, they want to go in the Seattle area doing digital, and that's what they want to do. The big driver of you need to move from labor to value is part of what we have done, But the big driver is the talent arbitrage that's happening right now in the world. The demographic dividend that we talk about, the median age of countries like India, China, Mexico, Poland, Russia, Egypt, Vietnam, the median age is 25 to 30 years. And that is what's driving the move to value. So what's the future looking like? You must have heard this before, GBS is dead. GBS is dead. If you have not heard this, please realize GBS in the traditional form is dead. Those of us, we are still living in our past mindset. Of course, my designation is also Chief Operating Officer of GBS, but I know for a fact that GBS is dead. Now, the work that GBS does, the value that GBS delivers, that's not dead. So GBS is dead, but it's reincarnating itself as a digital transformative entity that will drive tremendous value to the enterprise. And I'll talk a little bit about that. The second thing, the federated and distributed leadership reality is going to be upon us. Till 5 years back, India had only a handful of global leaders in our space. Probably 5, 10, not more than that. But today, most of the leaders that you talk to, including those who were on stage just now, and those you will hear later today, every enterprise will tell you that the number of global roles, which are not transactional, which are not service delivery, which are not doing stuff at a lower cost somewhere and passing it back to the business somewhere, the number of those roles are dramatically increasing right now in India and the countries that I talked about. Enterprises around the world are now ready for that federated, distributed leadership because of COVID. During the pandemic, people realized that you don't have to, all CXOs don't have to be in the same meeting room every day. And that's why the CXOs are now distributed around the world in most leading organizations, but this is a trend that's going to accelerate in the time to come. The third thing, standard tech. How many of you in this room have one ERP for your enterprise? Oh really? Okay, so you are a new company, carve out of one from a large organization is possible, but normally when you ask this question, you never get any hand raised because ERPs take long to execute, and by the time you reach to the end of the process, something else has happened in the ERP world, and then you are back to square one. Now the move from ERP to standard tech is happening. And one standard tech will drive large enterprises globally. And hence, the ability to become flexible is becoming increasingly high. And the last thing, the markers of value will change. You heard it now, but the markers of value from cost savings, productivity, SLAs, KPIs is going to change. Lalita was telling me just now that in her organizations, they don't even talk about continuous improvement anymore because that's part of the DNA. So the traditional ways of, here is the service capability KPI, here is the cycle time, here is the COPIS, we used to call it back in the Six Sigma days. Those kind of things are going to change. The markers of value are going to change. But why is the progress slow? I mean, this is not a new discussion. We have been having this discussion for the last 3-4 years for sure. The first reason for resistance is the frozen middle. And this frozen middle is not just in the enterprise, it's also within us. So if you go to GCC setups in India or elsewhere, the leaders are already talking about value being different for a few years now. The talent, which is entry level, doesn't want to do transactional work anymore. They are definitely looking to up the value chain. But the frozen middle in our GCCs is not ready for making that change because they have not been trained for driving that change. And it's the same thing back in the enterprise. The CXOs see the value. The frontline who touches the GBS sees the value. But the leadership in between doesn't see that value, doesn't understand that today. So that frozen middle back in the business and in the GCCs is the first hindrance to this change. Second, value is harder to measure. We just heard an example of invoice processing. Of course, it's very easy to measure value in invoice processing. cycle time, accuracy, cost. How do you drive value? One of the things we do in our GBS is planogramming. So those of you who, or it's also called shelf optimization. So when you go to any store, there is a science behind how you see the various products placed. So if you have a promotion on a Lay's variant, that will be at a certain level. If you have the traditional, already hot selling variant, that will be at a certain level. And then when you have new innovations coming up, that will be at a certain level. The quantity of each one of them, the placement of each one of them, the location in the store of each one of them, there is a science behind it. And that drives revenue for us every day. So if you see that cooler out there, there is a way it's organized for consumption. How do you drive or how do you measure the efficiency of this process? I would much rather have somebody take longer at a higher cost, but do it well so that my revenue is 2x, than to get it on time, do it 10% cheaper or 20% cheaper, but then it doesn't drive revenue. When I run an engineering center, when I'm designing safety on my car, I don't care about cost. I don't care about cycle time. I do care about the end-to-end cycle time, but I don't care about the transactional cycle time. I care about the safety of my car. So when you think about value, this value now is getting more and more difficult to measure, and hence we default to what we know. Cycle time, accuracy, cost. Cycle time, accuracy, cost. And now that is dramatically changing. The third thing that's driving or this hindrance is back in the business. The general managers, the MDs, the CEOs, they usually grew from the business. During the first 15 years of their career, they learned various parts of the business: procurement, cycle time, procurement, supply chain, commercial, finance, and then they became general managers. There is a valid concern back in the business that if we move all this work into GBS, if we move all this work into whatever that entity is, which is not in my market, where do I get my next GMs from? And then there are various answers to this question, but these are the broad three themes which are preventing the acceptance and adoption of this new paradigm of value. So what do you do? And this is a group of practitioners, so I thought I'll make it, an interactive part where it has to make sense to us. I mean, whatever is happening in the world is fine, but what do I and you need to do? So the first thing in my mind that all of us need to do is to lead the way. People back in our business are as unfamiliar with this future as all of us. So nobody knows the answers. And once again, cost, labor arbitrage, everyone knows this for the last 3 years, 3 decades. But right now, whatever this future is getting carved, we have to lead the way because we understand everything coming together. We are the only people, and I keep giving this example, in PepsiCo, GBS is the only place where analytics, commercial, marketing, supply chain, procurement, financial planning, IT, legal, is sitting together in one place, serving every market in the world. There is no other place, including our headquarters. So when you see everything at the same time, you are the ones who can visualize the future best. So we have to lead the way. We cannot depend on others to tell us what we need to do in the future. So that's the first thing we have to do differently. The second thing, all of us who were Six Sigma practitioners, we used to learn this in our Six Sigma training. What gets measured, gets done. So if you are measuring value the old way, you will continue to do stuff the old way. So start measuring and articulating value in other ways than the traditional cost. So what we are doing in PepsiCo right now, last year we launched our value delivery framework in GBS, which has financial value, reputation value, people value, top line value, and compliance value. We measure each one of them, most of them in dollar terms, but in some cases they are not in dollar terms. For example, we have a commitment to PepsiCo Positive. If one of our GBS teams has helped improve a formulation which reduces the amount of sodium in our chips, we capture that as a value that GBS has delivered. And we report that value. We are still, just 1 year old, but there is a lot more we are doing. Reputation. If we are able to make sure that our vendors around the world do not indulge in child labor, we capture that as reputational and compliance value. We have to start measuring, articulating, and communicating. If we don't do that, we'll be always stuck in the old way. And the last one, when you have a frozen middle, melt the middle. And we have to melt the middle. How do you melt the middle? By bypassing, by educating, and by communicating. Bypassing, tell the story to the CXO, tell the story to the people who work with you, so that the middle gets to know about this story from two sides back in the business. Second, communicating. Engage in a dialogue. Tell them what you intend to do. Tell them what you can do. Tell them about the potential that's today left untapped. And over time that will, get reciprocated. And finally, make sure that whatever you do gains enterprise-wide visibility. So I think these three we will have to start doing. But then what kind of leaders will make this happen? Some of you might have noticed I used images generated by Dolly, so artificial intelligence for this. And the prompt I put, if you look around this room, there are maybe 5 women leaders. That's something we have to change in our industry. So I said, women superheroes who will transform our industry. So this is the image that Dolly gave me, so I used it. The leaders that will make it happen will be bold, courageous, and passionate, who will not be order takers. A lot of time, even today, even in our own enterprise, I see this order taker behavior. If you have the order taker behavior, you will not be able to drive this change. But those leaders, and many of us in this room, those leaders who are courageous, who are bold, who are confident, who are able to see the future, who are able to take that bet, will be able to drive this change. And we have to learn to push back. We have to learn to say what's the alternate way. We don't need to always say yes to everything. That's one of the big hindrances to breaking the status quo. So that's the first attribute of the leaders that will make this change. The second attribute is the leaders will have to know the business code. It's amazing to me, even today, after 30 years of this industry, how few of the leaders still spend time back in the business. And we still keep on drinking our own Kool-Aid back in Bangalore or Hyderabad or Gurgaon or Pune or Bombay or wherever we are. The work gets done in the business. When the value gets migrated or the delivery of value gets migrated to your enterprise, you will have to learn the business code. You will have to learn how your company makes money. And then only you can contribute to the making money of your company. And then only can you move to the value chain. Otherwise, you will always continue to be a service center. What we are trying to do in Know the Business Code muscle is every commercial and supply chain facing associate has to spend time in a plant. So we are lucky we have many plants in India. We make sure that every associate who touches commercial and supply chain spends at least 2 days in a plant working on the shop floor, making sure how we make our amazing drinks and food products. They know what works, they learn what doesn't work, they build credibility back in the enterprise. You need to know what the headwinds are coming for your company, what kind of transformation roadblocks your company is facing. If you don't do that, if you're stuck only within your center, you will not be able to drive this change. The third thing is all of us will have to be effective storytellers. This is a big limitation in our industry, mostly to do with cultural nuances of the countries that we operate in. We tend to believe we are humble and modest, that we don't talk about ourselves. But the ability to tell a forceful, confident story which resonates with the stakeholders will be a differentiator. And finally, these leaders will be credible, they will be collaborative, and they will be consistent. And I think this is the kind of muscle that all of us will need to build. This is the kind of muscle that we need to spot in our future talent leaders. And if we do this, we already are contributing, we have the capability, we have the talent pool. If we build these capabilities in us and our teams, we will move from a center that delivers cost advantage, efficiency, and productivity to great centers which become enterprise partners and drive enterprise value. So I think this is the future. If we don't do it, technology will do it. The question is, are we all ready to do this? And as leaders who are there in this conference room today, this is an invitation to you. This is an invitation to all of us to become the kind of leaders that will drive this next step change in our industry. That's all I had to say right now, but we have 5 minutes and happy to take some questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ranjan. It was, I'm finally able to see you face to face. I think we have done a lot of sessions. Wonderful insights, Ranjan. If you may want to share some more insights, how do we build the gap of leadership which is coming in, and anything specific you and your organization is doing, especially taking the global context? So that will be helpful.
That's a great question, Dilip. Thank you so much. So the question is, how do you bridge the gap? I think the one thing that we are doing, and I recommend this very strongly to all of you, is not to hire only from the GCC industry. So as all of you know, we have set up our center in Hyderabad 4 years back, and now it's over 3,000 people. The first crop of leaders, we had 50%, we hired them from the GCC industry, but the other 50%, we hired them from the food and beverages industry. And they did not know anything about running a process. They were people who ran commercial operations. They were people who ran supply chain operations. So they struggled in the beginning because they wanted to be in the field. They wanted to be on the shop floor. They did not want to be in an air-conditioned office, talking to people. And thankfully, that got disrupted because of the pandemic. So everyone became on a level playing field. But on a serious note, that's the first thing we have to do. The diversity of backgrounds in our teams is very, very important. If we keep on hiring people with the same mindset, we will keep on getting results in the same way. So it's important to get the best of the industry. It's also important to get the external perspective. That's the first thing. Second is, what behaviors do you reward and recognize? So knowing the business cold muscle, business impact muscle, we are consciously, very aggressively promoting and rewarding and recognizing. There is an interesting, so PepsiCo has something called the next big idea. This is a global, company-wide, every year we run this program, and a lot of our new products and innovations come out of this. So everyone is very excited about this. It's incredible that in the last 2 years, so we got formed as GDS globally 4 years back. In the last 2 years, 2 of the 3 finalists globally have come from GBS. And this year, day after tomorrow is our presentation for this year. Once again, 2 of the 3 finalists are from GBS. So this is because we encourage this behavior of knowing the business code, driving value beyond what you're doing today. Hopefully this time they will win. We haven't won the last 2 times, but hopefully this time they will win. So I would say hire, diversity, and reward and recognize this behavior. These are the 3 things we are doing differently.
Thank you very much for a wonderful presentation. My name is Takashi from Nomura Research Institute. I'm just curious that you say the value-added the more value added that GBS will be, the more difficult to be setting up the tangible KPIs or goal sets. How would you manage that kind of dilemma? Because the first stage would be like very easy, consolidated work that could be easily monitored, like a CCC, or anytime, like you mentioned about the metaphor of the safety car. But the more value added it would be, the more difficult it would be to manage such kind of things, to motivate employees and to set up the targets or KPIs. How would you manage that?
That's a great question. And we are facing this challenge right now. So like I said, the 5 buckets of value that we identified: financial, reputational, operational, people, and business value. All these 5. So what we give our business leaders is you can check any one of these 5 boxes and articulate any one of these numbers. So traditionally there was just financial value. But now we are saying you can check any one of the 5. But if you don't check any one of these 5, that means you are not delivering value at all. And then you have to question whether what you are doing is even necessary. So that's the first step. Give people an option beyond what's the traditional way. That's the first thing. Second, celebrate all 5. So traditionally our temptation is to celebrate anything that gives top line or bottom line impact. Now we consciously want to celebrate and do celebrate all 5 types of value. So if somebody has driven something for reputational impact, we will also celebrate them as much as somebody who gives $50 million of incremental revenue impact. So that's the second thing we would do. Third is, I think, I don't want to name the vendor, but enterprise service management is becoming a key word for all of us. With enterprise service management, there is always an opportunity for us to tag certain activities to a certain impact. So you automate this reporting rather than making this subjective. So I would say these 3 things, but if you have any more ideas, happy to take them and bring them back home.
Thank you so much.
There's a question there.
So it's interesting you mentioned about multiple ERPs in an enterprise, large enterprise, and you also mentioned to quote that by the time you implement, you're back to square one, which I guess you're alluding to the fact that it takes too long to roll out these things, and then you have multiple such systems running in your organization, and you also talked about being flexible. So how do you bring enterprise-wide visibility, flexibility? Are you investing in certain technologies today to give you that leverage to cut across all of these different systems, particularly ERPs in your enterprise?
Yes. So answer is yes. So we are going through a massive ERP program, again a 10-year program. We call it PepsiCo Global Template. So this is hopefully will give us one template. But what we are doing is PGT, GBS, and transformation works together. They report to the same leader, and we have an overlay, a very thin system of record, which basically gives us a visibility to whatever is happening below. This is not unfamiliar to all of us, but the answer is yes. I know my time's up. I don't like the red color, so this is no good. Yeah, so we ignore red. We just go and win as blue. No, just kidding.
Take one.
One more question?
So, the biggest challenge we do have, getting a seat on the table, getting a voice on the table, to become an enterprise partner. What are some of the things that we can do to actually establish a partnership? Because a lot of the times there is, always that pushback where people are not comfortable for whatever reason from partnering with us. So how do you bridge that gap?
That's a great question. That's the frozen middle challenge we all have, where we keep chipping in, but this doesn't give way. And that's where I would come to the last 4 points I talked about. Tell them what you are going to do what you promised them you will do, and then tell them what you have done. So that's a repeated storytelling, I think would be the recommendation that I would give. So clearly this is a message for me to get out of stage, but I'm happy to engage with you over lunch. Thank you very much for patiently listening to me.
Thank you very much for those very insightful perspectives. request you to be here for a moment, please, Priyaranjan. Can we have Rakesh to do the honors of giving the thank you memento to Priyaranjan Jha for that absolutely wonderful presentation. Thank you.